Something I neglected to show you last week was what are called section boxes for 3D views that I think you will like a lot. If we go to a 3D view, and I took my sample file and put a second floor on it just for grins, this guy. So when you have a multi-story building and you want to see just the first floor, or if you want to see into it in any fashion, you can click on section box in a 3D view, section box in properties, and you get this box. And as you move its sides into the building, it will then cut a section there. So you can see in everywhere you want to go, and that works in works in perspective, it works in color, it works in all that kind of stuff. And if you have a multi-story building and you want to see just, let's say, the first floor, you can grab the top control of that and drag it down to where you'll just see the first floor. And this is a really nice way to demonstrate stuff live. You can spin it around, you can change the visual style, you can do all that kind of stuff. And it behaves in every respect as if this were the model, and it ignores everything that's on top. So shading and sunshine and stuff would still come in, just like we saw last time. Also, what's interesting is when we get around to 3D printing from Revit, we can, let's say, drag this in to here somewhere. And when you export to a 3D file, it'll be this much, not anything bigger. Just what you see on the screen is what you get coming out the other end. So section boxes are great, and I apologize for ignoring them last time. Today will be a little drier, but I think also very useful. I want to talk about text types, text styles, if you will. And the important thing to remember in terms of Revit is, since each view's dimensions and annotations, you create them in that view, they don't get inherited by other views. When you say I want stuff a 1/4 of an inch high in this particular view right here, which is 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, Revit does whatever it has to do to the text to make it so that when that's plotted at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, it will always be that 1/4 of an inch high. Change the scale of that and put it on a sheet, it will still be a 1/4 of an inch high. It's just entirely consistent. You don't have to think about what we went through with Cherokee, divide by 6 and multiply by 48 or whatever all that stuff was. You just don't have to do it. So let's look at that some. Let's put up a piece of text. All these things that you put on an individual view, but not on others, are here in the Annotate tab. Let's just pick the text tool. And we have a couple of choices for that coming right off the bat. And one is just to create text that doesn't have any leaders attached to it. We're not saying, move this door. We're just typing something off to the side. So we pick text. And you can either just click and start typing. This is some kind of big text. And when you're done, you just click outside. Or if you want to keep it, say, constrained within this room, we can pick that piece of text and then drag a rectangle, and the text will stay rectangle. And as you can see, the rectangle, the text box is what it's called, will expand in length to accommodate whatever's coming. And then if you drag it, it will then do all that word wrap kind of stuff. This text is a 1/4 of an inch high, and it will plot a 1/4 of an inch high when we plot this view at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. If I change this scale of the view to a 1/4 inch equals a foot, which means it's going to get twice as big, the walls will be twice as far apart, the text gets relatively smaller, so when you plot it, it's bigger again. This size, 1/4 inch, is how big it's going to plot whatever you do. And the only issue might be if you go into, like, I'm going to do this at 1/8 of an inch per foot, the text is getting bigger, and you might have to adjust the sort of the wrapping of that if it radically changes in size. But by and large, you should be thinking ahead to say, I guess I really would like this to plot an eighth of an inch equals a foot and set it that way. And then as you keep working with it, your text will be appropriate. You don't want to have to change scales radically and have your text shift all over the place. Experiment. It's really nice. It works great. Text is a family, and within that family, there are as many types as you want. Revit comes just with this particular template, 1/4 inch Arial and 3/32. Why 3/32? Well, that's as close as they get to like 1/10 of an inch, which is it's just a nice size to do. So we can just change that to that other size, and we see that it's going to print, a chunk smaller than that. We have a couple of other choices with text when we go to make that, and TX is a shortcut instead of going up to the menu. We can put leaders on it, so it'll have an arrow with either one segment, two segments, or an arc. Let's do the 2 one for right now, and I'll say this the 2 one will sort of snap into 90 if you want it to be there, and then click. This is a door opening, and that's kind of big, so I'll select that and kick it down to the smaller size, just the way you change any type in a family to another type. You do whatever you need to do here. If we have multiple, if we want to move this and say this is a door opening and this is a door opening using the same note for some reason, or if you have a finish note that's going to aim at 2 different parts of the wall or something along those lines. A couple of things with this. One is let's move it to a better location, and the other would be let's add some leader arrows to it. So if you pick a piece of text by its little movie arrows here, whatever you call them, then the text moves, but the arrow stays in the same place. You also notice that text will line itself up with other text vertically and horizontally, which is nice to keep things ordered. So that's to move the text itself. To move the whole object, you click on the leader, and then you can move the leader and the text together. And then to give it multiple arrowheads, when you've selected it, the option comes up to add arrowheads, and this one will add one to that side, and this will add one to that side. I'll do this one just for now. And there's that, and I'll aim this over here. And you can shape how the arrow gets there so it doesn't overlap stuff. In addition, a couple little things. You see this arrow is coming off the upper left, and this is coming off the lower right. To get that a little more normal, we have choices here for the ones that are coming off to the left. Are they attached to the top, the middle, or the bottom of the piece of text? And the ones that are coming off from the right, the same thing, and I'll move that up there. And so that looks a little more accomplished there. You can do arc leaders if you want, text, arc. Arcs are just one curve. As soon as you click, you start doing text. I'm sort of used in AutoCAD to hitting enter when I'm done with text, but that just adds a new line. If you want to finish your text, you can either click outside. Let's see, if I hit escape, do you want to keep changing? You have to go through all that. So just clicking outside the box will terminate that command. But let's look at the styles themselves. This is sort of a combination of page 1 and a little bit later. Is if we decided we wanted a different font for our large text, just like any type, if you want to essentially copy something and modify it, you pick the piece of text that you've got, you hit edit type. Let's duplicate. And let's call this, let's say I want to make it a little smaller. Let's say I want to make it 1/8 inch fancy font. And I don't know what that's going to be yet. The name can be whatever you want. It can be 1/8 inch Arial. It can be room names. It can be use this text to label streets. It can be anything you want. And this way, if I'm not sort of specifying Algerian or some crazy font, I can just play with this without having to change the name. But I will, in this fancy font, I'll make it, let's pick another font. Let's do free, I don't know, anything you want. I regret that Revit doesn't preview the fonts. You sort of have to know what you're looking for here. But Revit isn't a place to go doing graphic design font considerations. We're trying to get drawings out as quickly and efficiently and consistently from our end as possible, so people at the other end don't have to keep sort of thinking, well, does italic font mean something special here? Anyway, Gil Sans MT, I would just pick that. That's not that different. Let's pick something different. Goody old style. Okay, that's a little fancier. So this you might well use for the name of the project on your title page, and it's a font an inch high, and everybody can read it in the plan room and everything. You can play with that to your heart's content. We also have a couple other options here for the piece of text itself, the instance. Essentially, these options are the ones that are available up here, just a little more explicit. But in terms of working with what this thing looks like, let me just do one thing. You'll notice that this style of text, let's see about this one. These are both set to have an opaque background that will hide whatever's underneath them. And part of the reason for that is in a set of construction documents, whatever you've written, any notes or comments or specs or dimensions that are written have legal precedent over anything that's drawn. So I think the idea here is if there's any sort of confusion, and if my lines were showing through there and it made the C look like something or other else and somebody read it as ARD or something or other, we wouldn't want that to happen. So by and large, text that you use, like on top of drawings, will have its opaque background turned on. As with most things, we can change that. If I go into edit this whole style, edit this type, or fancy font, we can say, I'd like to have this background be transparent, apply, and then we see the lines of the building coming through. And you can see how if you got line weights turned on and stuff, that could get confusing, especially since the text is in some ways the most important part of this. Okay, what else is available? Edit type. We can say, let's show the border. And that will let you see the, however big that is. You'll put a box around it. Maybe that's how you want to identify keynotes or something, or you might want to call attention to these to somebody who's going to go measure and say, be sure to pay attention to the ones that got borders around them. We can change what kind of arrow we've got. I really don't like this guy right here, this little AutoCAD looking arrow. So I usually change it to like the filled 20-degree one. Apply, which looks a little more stylish to me than that. And if you want, you can make your own. I use these a lot, a dot. I use a dot when it's not applying to any particular thing, but maybe I just want to say this whole area here is parquet. I can't point to any one piece of that, but these guys are aiming at door openings. This is at a larger, less defined sort of a thing. And we can make these italic and underlined and bold. I'll just do all those at one time. That's about what it's got in terms of text. It doesn't have kerning. It doesn't have inner line distances. It's just, this is what you get. But one thing it does have. Let's turn those off for a second. Like AutoCAD, we do have a width factor option where one is just the way that the font's defined. If you want it wider for a big title or skinnier because you need to fit more stuff in a given space. Let's see, I can make my width factor 0.75. and squeeze it down that way. And this will affect all the instances of that type, of that fancy font type. Those aren't available just for the individual object. In AutoCAD, I think they are. Revit's trying to make things more consistent and keeping most of all that happening in the type. If you need to do things like underline just one word in a piece of text, we can double click it and sort of start acting on the text itself with some little mini word processor tools up here. They're not very great, so just bear that in mind. But if I wanted just my QU to be underlined, I could just select them and hit underline. So I've got those sorts of options, or italic, or any of those double click that are available. You notice font and font height are not options there. One height and one font is what you get in any given piece of text. If you need a different font, create a new text type. And I guess I should say, if you have a list or longer body of text that cries out for headings in a larger font, the only way to do that is to have the headings in a separate type, which means in a separate piece of text. And then you have to, if you're moving them, you got to move around together and keep them aligned and stuff like that. And so frankly, I make them, as I mentioned in the notes, so I do it all with a single type and just bold and underline the headings and skip a line and call it a day. The bold and underline will pop stuff out enough. You can tell that that's different from what follows. You can cut and paste from any word processing program. Let's see if I got something on my desktop I can copy out of. Let's open the laser printer user guide. That'll be pretty exciting. I'm just going to go get some text here. So grab the text, Control C, back to AutoCAD, Revit, whatever this is. I can't just paste this into the view. I need to paste it into a text object. Let's close that. Let's go to annotate text. I just want this right now. And then Control V. So any of that, and a lot of times when you have specifications or something like that, you can prepare them in a Word document and then paste them into here. There's really two ways to handle specifications, and one is to have a set of drawings that then refer to a book. You say refer to page, or it's usually in master spec format, section 17.1.1, and it would be in there. I don't like to repeat any kind of information, either several times on one sheet or on each sheet. I would have a list. Well, we really won't get into till next semester about sort of putting a real construction set together. But typically you would have, if this were something important about window weatherproofing, you would have a list on your, let's say your second sheet would be specifications for this project. You have windows, and you have all windows shall be such and such and such and such. And then over here in the drawing next to the window, I just have a keynote for number 1 and go there, and then it's by reference. So you only have to update it one place. I do like to have it in the drawing because it's really a pain to have to go into Word to fix something. Do I have that file on this computer? That kind of thing. It's great to have it all in one place. And that way too, when you know you've sent it to a consultant or somebody, they have all that information. They don't have to guess it at some file that's on your computer. Anyway, but these guys, long pieces of text. When you double click in here and the word processing options come up, we can, let's see if this will work. If I can just, let's make this be a list, yeah. So it turns this into an outline format where basically each time you've hit the return key, you get a new number 3. I'll get rid of this one because that's just a blank line, and the others then renumber. And I think if I hit, so tab, yeah, tabbing any of those will give me a indented outline, and the distance those indent are here in the that's the height, and this is the, so it's 1/4 inch high and a 1/2 inch indent for each of those levels. And it works pretty well. It's not Word, it doesn't have all those characteristics, but it can get construction documents out pretty cleanly. Again, the text in a set of construction documents are not art. A couple little last things just to be useful is if we want to say, we can insert symbols in here. If I wanted to put a plus or minus sign in here, I can right click where it wants to go and go to symbols. And then we get a list of about 20 common symbols that you find in, there's plus minus down there, in construction documents. So that can either just be inserted or it can be replacing something. If I want to replace this T with a Greek letter, I can right click, symbols. If it's not here, I can go to other, which takes me into the Windows character map, which has, you know, every symbol in the world and Tagalog and Russian and everything. But let's just say an upside down. Oh, this is where you get fractions. If you want to do little fractions, an upside down question mark. So select, I got to select it from here and copy it. And then Control V to paste it. So it's a little tedious, but you don't use them that much. And Revit will already by itself put in the appropriate symbols, the theta for diameter on a dimension and stuff. Well, I put on the bottom of page 3, I was trying to think of exercises with text, and I realized that I've already done one, but why don't we do them together just to see. If I did want to be able to do my keynotes with an arrow and then a boxed keynote number that would expand to be keynote 512 if I've never had that many, but let's look at what's involved there. And the first thought would be, how big is the text? Let's say that 1/8 inch. So I'll go to text. I'm going to create it first and then sort of add the pieces to it. I know I want two segments to the leader to make it be like this. And I want it to say 3. And I don't hit enter. You can just hit close if you want. You can click outside or hit close, or hit Control Q for quit. It's like, however you feel like doing this, you go ahead and do it. I just say close because it's obvious what's going on. So there's that. And again, with Revit, you can always put something up and then turn it into what you want just by editing its type. So this is 1/4 inch aerial. That's kind of big. Let's make a new one called Keynote. Let's call it Box Keynote. So we pick it, we see what it's like. We don't like it, we're going to edit type, duplicate. I've probably done edit, duplicate, edit type, duplicate like 25,000 times in the past 15 years. Just like a lot of times. But that's how you turn this program into what comes out of the box to what your particular sort of designer needs are, what the project needs, what the client needs. So let's call this name, and I'm not going to give it a size because maybe I'm not sure of that yet, but I know I want it for my keynotes. I'm going to keynote, boxed keynote. That's what I said I call it. Boxed keynote. Okay. And I'll make it opaque. I want to turn the border on. This leader border offset is the distance from the border to the text itself. You can leave that where it is. Leader arrow. I'm going to make it, instead of this ugly one, I'm going to make it let's say a 30-degree arrow just to see what that looks like. I'll leave it Arial. I'll make the text 1/8 of an inch high to see how that goes. Tabs don't really matter. We're just doing one line here. Nothing's going to change. I'll do it bold just to call it out. That should do. So there's that. If I decide that this is number 512, the box gets bigger. We don't have to drag it and stretch it. That's just the way it is. So whatever my note about window flashing, that's that. And we have a little a legend somewhere very early in the drawing set of what things mean. And we'd say boxed rectangle text means refer to keynote number. Dimensions. It's the same tool as an AutoCAD, but it works differently. I think you'll find it works more fluidly and flexibly. We got a couple of kinds of dimensions. And the first would be the temporary dimensions. When you pick something, you get dimensions to other things that you might be dimensioning it relative to. Right now it's taking all these to the center lines of the nearest walls, which is not that useful at all. So the first thing I want to do is to tell Revit, do it to the nearest faces of walls. So I'm going to escape out of that. And I think I wrote this down. This is in Manage. Yes. This is the top of page 4. Manage. This is where all the sort of backstage stuff happens. Settings, additional settings, annotations, temporary dimensions. Boop, 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 boop. And here's where we tell it to make temporary dimensions measure from faces. And then if we're doing doors and windows, do I want to go to the center lines of them or to the edges of them? And I think since we've been doing edges as we've been measuring everything, let's go to the edges of openings, the opening itself, okay? So I pick this wall again, and it gives me the distance from this side to the one over there, and from this side to the one over there, which is very useful. So the temporary dimensions are the ones that we can use actually to move stuff around in the model. So if I pick this and decide, that room was 12 feet 11, not 13 feet 1.5, I can just pick this temporary dimension, edit dimension length, 12, let's say 12 feet 6, just so we can see the difference, and it moves. So temporary dimensions both tell you what's going on there, as well as act as a control for that. And lots of things in Revit work like that. The elevation symbols tells you there's an elevation, and really, if you think about it, this thing right here, that is the elevation. If I delete that, the elevation over here goes away. They're synonymous, this guy right here. Delete. 1A will be deleted. It's gone. Let's pick that wall again. And let's say I wanted to know where that wall was, not in relation to this here over here, but in relation to this wall. Pretty much every dimension has 2 or more points, one of which is simply the end of the witness line. And the other in the middle of it is the dot that tells Revit what to measure to. So if I pick this dot and drag it over to here, it will then give me that dimension. It might be something I know, it might be something I'm trying to find out. So with using that as a starter point, if I want to know how far this edge is from this wall, let's say I laser shot the whole thing, want to check it, and I pick this dot and move it over until it clicks to that line. And now I know what that is. So if that looks good to you, we can change the temporary dimensions into permanent dimensions just by clicking on that dimension icon, make this a permanent dimension, which is like just a dimension. And there it is. When you come back to select something, its permanent dimension becomes temporarily a temporary dimension, and you can change it there. You can change them when they're small and blue. You can't change them when they're large and black. Is what that goes down to. So small and blue. Oh, that was just actually 18 feet 0. 18 feet 0. And now the wall moves and it's 18 feet 0. So that was a temporary dimension changed into a permanent dimension. If we want that wall to stay always right there in relation to that, we can constrain it by locking this dimension, permanent dimension. We lock it, and now and now if I move this, that one moves as well. More likely, you would simply pin this one, pin this wall, so it can never move, and then this one always stay 18 feet away from it. You asked about where the dimension goes. When you select a dimension, you can hover down till you get that little marker, and then you put the dimension line wherever you want, high, low, in between. Maybe here, if that's where I actually took that dimension. And then this dot lets you move that piece of text around. You know, there might have been something right here, like a piece of furniture or something, so you move it over here. And doing that, we have a choice of whether we want to see this leader line that's sort of explicitly saying this piece of text goes with this dimension line. When this is selected, one of its options is to display or not the leader. We turn that off. And I go both ways. I think one thing you want to make sure you don't do. Also when we're dimensioning. So creating temporary dimensions, we said look from wall face to wall face. Now I want to do the same thing for the permanent dimensions. So if I go to dimension, annotate, dimension, I've got a couple of choices. By default, Revit starts measuring from a center line to a center line. And I never build things that way or measure them that way. So I'm going to just change that, and this will affect this whole drawing to wall faces. So now it's going to go to wall faces, but not go to the center line. And then I have a choice here of all walls or individual references. We'll get to all walls in a bit. That would be so this line, and then this line, and this line. One thing about being able to move the dimension text around, here it's very clear what's going on. I mean, it's a little weird, but if I turn the leaders off, I could end up dragging them around so they did that, which is wrong. So don't do that. I'm going to Control Z a couple of times. You know, certainly keep this guy, you know, near where it needs to be. In the dimensions style, of course, there's a style. It's a type. We have a bunch of things we can set there. Let's look at those. I don't know if you remember in AutoCAD, but we had a couple of different pages of stuff we went through, all the different dimension things. It's a little cleaner here with Revit because we don't have to make a distinction between associative or annotative, whatever the word is, and other dimensions. It's all just one type. So my default dimension was this linear dimension with 3/32 inch high Arial font. Let's go to edit type and look what else is available there. Let's just start at the top. Dimension string type. The graphic shows the 3 ways that the same dimension string can be visualized in Revit. Leader line type, that would be the little curvy line that led from the dimension line to the dimension text. I guess our options are just lines or arcs. Show the leader when text moves. So these are called the witness lines because they sort of run down to tell where this dimension is coming from. So if the text moves, let's just see what that is. Let's say beyond witness. Apply. I don't mess with this stuff too much. Okay. So what this is saying, anytime I move it away from the dimension line, I put the arc on. What the away from origin, what beyond witness lines is saying, I guess it's just if it, well, oh, well, okay, it's fine there. As soon as I come outside this slot, it does it. I do it away from origin and just leave it at that. Edit type. And you know, the fussiness of this is to be fussy once and get things looking just the way you want them. And then that just continues for the whole rest of your project or your semester or your career, and not to have to keep rethinking them for every drawing. pretty much every firm has a standard architectural template, and you just start everything with that. It's all here. If you want to change an arrowhead, you got to go to the CAD manager and ask if you can change the arrowhead. They don't want that happening because 3 different people might be working on the model, and if somebody likes filled arrowheads and somebody likes pointy arrowheads and somebody likes dots, it can get pretty chaotic. Okay, tick mark. This guy. Let's turn this on. Thick lines. So right now I've got sort of a long, fat tick mark for my arrowhead there. Edit type. Tick mark. Diagonal 3/64. That would be much smaller, which I kind of like, a little tidier. Matter of preference. A couple little things. Dimension line extension, that I think is, oh, one is Revit. These are the witness lines. This is the dimension line. And the dimension line extension is this part right here, 3/32 of an inch. Witness line control. And that's whether there's going to be a little gap here or whether it's going to, the witness line will come right down to the thing itself. I always prefer a gap. And so if you have a gap, how big is the gap? You know, all this stuff here, you can change that and they'll all change. Witness line extension, how far this extends. You know, who cares? Just so it's not too long. So you can see it, but it's not too long. Witness line tick mark. I have no idea what that is. Let's explore. Arrow 30 degree. Oh, no, we're not going there. It's just, yeah, I mean, and part of it is just busyness. You know, we want to convey, there's a graphic designer named Edward Tufte, who's just great. And one of his basic precepts is the most information with the least amount of ink. And that's a really good thing to think about as you're going through this. All of it. I mean, everything we present graphically. How do you present information most clearly? Because as soon as anything is extra, it can be misinterpreted. It can distract you from what you really should be looking at. Okay, edit type. Witness line tick mark. Center line symbol. Oh, that's when you dimension. Let's see how that works if we dimension to the center of something. Let's try that. Let's dimension from here to, yeah, to the center line of that window. It'll do it if that's indeed what we're finding here. Oh, I should have continued, but so that's kind of cool. I've never, you know, it's great. I have to explore all this stuff with you guys to figure out how it really works. Center line pattern. Center line. Oh, this is sort of interesting. That would be if we stretch this line through the thing. Center line pattern. Center line. Well, maybe make it a little smaller. I don't know. Okay, there you go. So center lines are long dash, short dash, long dash, short dash, and so that'll do that. And I'm not sure which the 1/4 inch. It looks like it's a 1/4 inch dash with the long things on either side of it. And if we stretch that out, it would be like that. That's sort of reinforcing center, center, center. This is fun. I'm enjoying it. Center line tick mark. That would be if we wanted an arrow right there. We don't. Interior tick mark display. Oh, dynamic or oh, dynamic. Interior tick mark display. Well, I don't know what that is. I don't know what the dynamic means there. But you can see that there's a bunch of options to play with here. And just as with the textile options, we have exactly the same ones here for the dimensions. We have our units format. These are set over here in manage project settings. We can stick on alternate units if you have to dimension them in inches, feet and inches and millimeters. You can say, let's do alternate units below them in millimeters. And then we get each of those distances in millimeters, should you ever need that. Let's not do it. Again, we have opaque or transparent background. I would always leave that opaque for dimensions. They're so important. So with these are different types. Do we look at these in Revit? I can't remember if we looked at the different aligned, linear, that kind of stuff. Did we? Okay, fine. I'll do a couple of test cases here. Revit really likes doing dimensions between things that are parallel. And that's what you can see from this aligned button up here. We got two parallel lines. So, you know, like from here to here, it's golden. From here to here, it's golden. Here I would like to dimension between 2 points, not 2 lines. But an aligned dimension will recognize that we're picking a point as opposed to an object and provide the dimension aligned with the 2 points picked, regardless of which objects they were on. Linear dimensions are a little different. They're going to give us either the vertical or the horizontal dimensions. So I pick here and here. They give me that or that, depending on where I put the cursor. Those are exactly the same. Amazing. Oh, it's at 45 degrees, but not this kind. Angular will give, oh, I got to measure 2 things. Either of those 2 dimensions. And again, the thing itself, the dimension itself can be moved, and the piece of text can be moved. Radial, it automatically puts the R in there. Diameter puts the theta. You can see that. And sometimes the slash mark and the theta goes straight across this way. In the other case, it's a commonly accepted symbol for the straight line that goes across a circle, hence diameter. Arc length. Arc length is a funny tool. DI for dimension, arc length. Pick the arc, and it doesn't just dimension the arc to start with. It wants to see what's at both ends, and then it does that. You got to have something there, and it's got to stay there. If I go and erase the line or the rectangle or something, it's going to disappear. Yeah, it's gone, which is funny to me. Which brings me to something else. If I'm set to dimension from face to face, but for these rooms, I want to dimension from center line to center line. Dimension aligned. If I get in here and hit the tab key, it will cycle between the available options. If I'm over sort of on this side of the wall, it'll cycle between the center line and there. If I'm over on this side of the wall, it'll be to that one. So I can wait till that's highlighted, and then I can say center, go to that one. On this wall, I had to sort of go pick to get all those points. Revit can do the whole wall at one time if you want. And that's with a dimension aligned. Instead of individual references, I want to pick a whole wall. In that case, I pick this wall, and it'll do that. If I pick it on the outside, it'll do it there. If I pick it on the inside, it'll do it there. But here in options, we can say also select openings by their centers, let's say by their widths, and intersecting walls as well. So instead of just being all one straight line, I'm going to get all those partial dimensions. And it'll give me that just like that. So I've got some of these, I'm going to have to move this out of here. And what I'm grabbing these by is the blue dot that's right at the bottom of the piece of text, so I can drag it out. Anyway, so I'll do that very quickly. If you double click the dimension text, we get a couple of choices of things we can do with that. We can simply replace that to say something like verify in field, which means I forgot to measure this. Please go, you guys do it. We can add to it. We can add text to this. I might want to say 16.1 and then put in a plus minus, meaning I'm not exactly sure. Check this, I'm pretty close. Or we could put stuff in front of it, above it, above the 16.1 to the left or to the right or underneath. What we can't do is, I'm double clicking on that text clearly here. Let's get rid of that. I can't replace it with text that says something like 13'4". Anything that looks like a dimension that's different from what it really is, it won't accept. You could probably type 136 INCHESs and it won't notice it. But just as like that, let's say 13'4", 15 foot, 3.5, won't take it. In AutoCAD, if you remember, you can make any dimension say whatever you want. Here, you really have to fudge it to change it, and it's probably a message that you shouldn't be doing it. So I've got this one, and I realize I want to continue that down for a couple more rooms. I don't have to start again. I would like it all to be one dimension string, so I can do that and say edit witness lines, and then continue adding points that will become part of that dimension string. Then click outside somewhere to terminate. Anyway, so a lot of options there. One thing I would like to point out is, unlike AutoCAD, where I can just say, give me a dimension from here to here, and it would create it, Revit won't. Revit only dimensions two things, either the face of it or the edge of it. And sometimes it's not necessarily what you suspect. If I want a dimension from the wall to here, I'll do the wall. And it's either going to pick the center or it's going to pick the point that's perpendicular to the wall right there. If I did dimension from here, it would then measure to that point. Or I could move it to the center. SC for snap center. Yeah. So only to perpendicular or to the center point. Because what else is there on a circle?